Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Nidhi Agarwal from Jamia Hamdard University, New Delhi. Today we will discuss about clinical trials under the module Product Development Part 2. The contents of this modules are as follows. First being clinical trial, second stakeholders in clinical trials, third roles and responsibilities of important stakeholders, fourth role of institution, fifth role of sponsor, sixth role of clinical investigator, seventh monitoring and role of monitor, eighth audit. Firstly, I will start with the definition of clinical trial. Following testing in laboratories and animal studies, the most promising treatments are moved into clinical trials. A clinical trial is a research study that tests how well an intervention works in a group of people. Tests for new methods of screening, prevention, diagnosis or therapy are also being conducted. The clinical trials are conducted in phases. During a trial, additional information is learned about an intervention, its risk and its effectiveness or its efficacy. According to E6 GCP, a clinical trial can be defined as any investigation in human subjects intended to discover or verify the clinical, pharmacological or other pharmacodynamic effects of an investigational product, to identify any adverse reactions to an investigational product, or to study absorption, distribution, metabolism and excretion of an investigational product with the object of ascertaining its safety or efficacy. In general, these studies are conducted under as many controlled conditions as possible so that they provide definitive answer to predetermined well-defined questions. Why there is a need of clinical trials? Clinical trials are basically critical step in translating scientific discovery into effective treatments. Most definitive method to determine whether a treatment is effective. They also help in determining the incidence of side effects, and lastly, theory is not always the best path in selecting an investigational product. Core components of clinical trials are involvement of human subject. The clinical trials must have a control comparison group. They must have a particular method to measure the intervention. The focus should be on the effect of medication which is not known, and they must be done before medication is a part of standard care. They should be conducted early in the development of therapies. The clinical trial must review existing scientific data and build on that knowledge. The clinical trial should have certain hypotheses. The protocol which is required for the conduct of clinical trial must be built on sound and ethical science. The protocol should control any potential bias which can happen during the conduct of clinical trial. Most study medication, procedures and other interventions undergo clinical trials. Nextly, I will start with stakeholders in clinical trials. There are different important stakeholders in clinical trials. These are as follows: sponsor, investigator, monitor, auditor and clinical research coordinator. First, I will start with the role of institution in conduct of clinical trial. First and foremost important role of institution is contracts. The sponsor contracts with the institution to conduct clinical trials related to the drug development. The contract should clearly state the services to be performed by institution. Second, research facilities. Institution should provide clinical investigators all research facilities for the proper conduct of trial. Institution should deal with institutional review board or other ethics committee for approval. Third, the execution. The institution should provide an investigator. The institution has the responsibility of recruiting the patient process. The institution should also help in executing the informed consent process. It is also the responsibility of the institution in collecting and safeguarding the data. Any deviation or amendment in the protocol should be reported to the ethics committee as well as the regulatory authorities. The adverse event reporting is also the responsibility of an institution. Next is patient care. The institution should protect right and well-being of the patients participating in the trial. Quality. Institution is responsible for the quality of the research being conducted in it. Monitoring. Institution may monitor any phase of the research trial and interact with the Indian as well as other regulators. Other responsibilities of the institution are as follows. The institution has the experience with the various protocols and international studies. The institution should provide trained research personnel and monitors. There should be a central quality assurance functions. The institution should provide proper central laboratory facility and data management facility for the proper conduct of the trial. Role of sponsor. A sponsor can be a pharmaceutical company or a clinical research organization. First role being investigator and institution or hospital selection. The sponsor should provide well qualified, trained and experienced and the investigator who is based at institution or hospital. According to Indian guidelines, the investigator should be a medically qualified person. A hospital or institution should have sufficient resources. They should be able to organize or coordinate the committees or select the coordinating investigator if required. They should provide a copy of protocol and up-to-date investigator's brochure to the investigator or institution. Second important responsibility is contract or agreement. An agreement with the investigator or institution clearly define that trial should be conducted with the approved protocol. Sponsors SOP for data recording, reporting or conduct of the trial would be followed. Sponsor has right to monitor, audit and inspect the site at any time. Investigator or institution have to retain the essential documents for appropriate duration. Financial aspects of the trial should also be declared clearly in the contract and agreements. Third, duties and function allocation. The sponsor should be able to identify, define, allocate and establish all trial related functions and duties to the qualified persons, institution or organization. Fourth, clinical trial management, data collection and records. Progress of clinical trial, safety data and efficacy endpoints should be assessed by the sponsors authorized individuals or organization or the independent data monitoring committee. The validation of electronic data or handling system should also be done. In this, an SOP should be framed in order to validate these systems. The unauthorized access of the data should be prevented and they should be able to maintain the adequate data access. Any transfer of ownership of the clinical data should be reported to regulatory authorities. The sponsor should also maintain the confidentiality as per the regulatory guidelines. Appropriate quality assurance and quality control systems with written SOPs should be at place. Submission of application to the appropriate authority for review, acceptance and permission to begin the trials should be done by the sponsor. Fifth, compensation to subjects and investigator. Compensation in case of any trial related injury should be provided to the subjects or the patients in accordance with the applicable regulatory requirements and as per the guidelines of ethics committee. Insurance or indemnification to the investigator against claims arising from the trial should be as per the regulatory requirements. Sixth, confirmation of review by ethics review board or the ethics committees. The sponsor is responsible to ensure that the ethics review board or the independent ethics committee has received the latest or amended version of protocol, written informed consent, any other written information provided to subject, the subject recruiting procedure, payment documents and compensation. The sponsor should assure that the ethics review board or the independent ethics committee approval has been obtained prior to enrollment of any patient in the trial. Seventh, information on investigational product. The sponsor should ensure that sufficient safety and efficacy data from preclinical studies or clinical trials are available regarding the investigational product. The sponsor is responsible to update the investigator's brochure and inform the same to regulatory authority. Eighth, investigational product manufacturing, coding, etc. The sponsor is responsible for the manufacturing of investigational product which should be done in accordance with good manufacturing practices. The investigational product should be coded and labeled as per regulatory requirements. The acceptable storage conditions should be provided to the investigational products. Suitable packaging of investigational product should be done prior to initiation of the clinical trials. The sponsor should maintain a mechanism that permit rapid identification of investigational product in case of medical emergency. The sponsor is also responsible for the assessment of results of formulated products and any change in the formulated products. Ninth, supplying and handling of investigational product. The sponsor is responsible for supplying the investigational drug to all the investigator only after approval or favorable opinion from the ethics committee. The SOPs should be provided for handling and storage of investigational drug. The sponsor has the responsibility in maintaining the sufficient samples of investigational drug for records of sample analysis. The samples should be retained for longer duration as per the regulatory requirements. 10th, safety information. Safety information should be notified by the sponsor to all the investigators and the regulatory authority which is being generated while conducting a clinical trial. 11th, adverse drug reaction reporting. Adverse drug reaction or adverse event reporting form should be provided to all the investigator by the sponsor. All adverse drug reaction, including the serious and unexpected, should be recorded to all the investigators, institution, and it should also be informed to ethics committees as well as regulatory authority. The sponsor should designate a qualified medical personnel to advise on trial related medical questions or problems. 12th responsibility of the sponsor is access to record. It is the responsibility of the sponsor to provide direct access to source data or documents for trial related monitoring, audits, ethics review and the regulatory inspection. The sponsor should verify that each subject has consented in writing to direct access to his or her original medical records for trial related monitoring, audits, ethics review, board review and regulatory inspections. 13th, monitoring. The trial should be adequately monitored in terms of objective, purpose, design, complexity, blinding, size and endpoints. It is the responsibility of the sponsor that the appointed monitor should verify the conduct of trial in compliance with the good clinical practices and the applicable regulatory requirement. 14th comes the role of sponsor in audits. It is the responsibility of the sponsor to appoint an individual to conduct an audit during the trial. The audit should be performed to assess the conduct of trial as per the standard operating procedures, good clinical practices and applicable regulatory requirements. Auditing should be as per sponsor's written procedures. The verification of auditor's document should be done by the sponsor. Termination of defaulting party if non-compliance is observed in the audit is the responsibility of the sponsor. 15th, premature termination or suspension of a trial. It is the duty of the sponsor to terminate the trial in case the risk is involved to the patients or subject participating in the trial. The trial which is being terminated should be immediately reported to investigator, institution, ethics review board and the regulatory authority. 16th, clinical trial reports. It is the responsibility of the sponsor that after the completion or termination of the trial, the reports should be provided to the regulatory authorities and to the ethics committees. Now I will start with the role of clinical investigator. A clinical investigator should be a medically qualified doctor who has obtained MBBS degree from an MCI approved college in our country. The first important duty exists in initiation of the clinical trial. Qualification and agreement. Investigator should be qualified, meet all the applicable regulatory requirements and familiar with appropriate use of investigational drug as described in protocol. He should comply with GCP and applicable regulatory requirements. He should permit monitoring and auditing by sponsor and inspection by regulatory authority. The investigator should maintain a list of appropriately qualified persons to whom he has delegated significant trial related duties. Second, adequate resources. Investigator should be able to demonstrate a potential for recruiting the required number of suitable subjects or patients within the agreed trial period. Sufficient time to conduct and complete the trial should be given by an investigator. The investigator should have adequate number of staff and adequate facilities in order to conduct the trial. the personnel assisting with the trial are adequately informed about the investigation product and trial related duties by the investigator. The second responsibility of investigator exists in conducting a clinical trial. The clinical trial conducted by the investigator should be in compliance with the protocol which is being agreed by sponsor or regulatory authority. The investigator should not implement any deviation or change without agreement with sponsor and prior review or approval or favorable opinion from the ethics committee, except where necessary to terminate the immediate hazards to the trial subjects. The proposed amendment should be submitted to the ethics committees for review or for their approval or favorable opinion. It should also be submitted to sponsor, regulatory authority, logistical and administrative aspects, and any deviation from the approved protocol should be documented by the investigator. Enrollment of subject. Unbiased selection of suitable subjects should be done as per the approved protocol. A physician can be consulted in order to obtain suitable subjects. The probability of an adequate recruitment rate for the study should be on the basis of retrospective studies. The investigator should maintain the subject's identification log as well as the screening or enrollment log. Randomization procedures and unblinding. Investigator should follow the trial's randomization procedures. The code should be broken in accordance with the protocol. In case of blinded trial, any premature blinding should be documented and explained to the sponsor. Informed consent document. The informed consent document designed by the investigator should comply the regulatory requirements. It should adhere to the good clinical practices and ethical principles in obtaining and documenting the informed consent. The investigator should ensure that the ICD and any other written information provided to the subject has been approved by ethics committees. The investigator and trial staff should not coerce or unduly influence subject to participate in the trial. The investigator should provide well clear and written information concerning the trial in a language readily understood by the subject or patient or his legal representative. It is the responsibility of the investigator to inform subject or subject's legally acceptable representative about the aspects of trial, including written information and favorable opinion and approval from the ethics committee. Investigator should ensure that before obtaining the informed consent, ample time is given to the subject to inquire about details of the trial and to decide the participation. The written informed consent obtained should be signed and personally dated by the subject or legally acceptable representative or impartial witness prior to conduct of a trial. The investigator should ensure the confidentiality of subject's identity and maintain the records as per regulatory requirement. Coming to the contents of informed consent form, the essential information in the informed consent form is as follows: purpose of the trial, trial treatment and probability for random assignment to each treatment, trial procedures including invasive procedure, subject's responsibilities during the trial, reasonably foreseeable risk or inconveniences and expected benefits, alternative treatment, compensation or treatment in trial related injury, subject's participation is voluntary, and he can withdraw at any time without penalty or loss of benefits. The subject should also be informed that the monitor, auditor, IRB or regulatory authority will have direct access to his or her original documents. The subject's identity will remain confidential. The name of the persons to contact for further information regarding the trial, the expected duration of the subject's participation in the trial, approximate number of subjects involved in the trial, foreseeable circumstances or reasons where the subject's participation may be terminated. Next duty of the investigator is medical care of the trial subject. The investigator should ensure that adequate medical care is being provided to a subject for any adverse effect related to the trial. On premature withdrawing from the study, the investigator should make a reasonable effort to ascertain the reasons. Communication with IRB or IEC. Before initiation of a trial, the investigator should have written or dated approval or favorable opinion from the ethics committee. A current or updated copy of investigator's brochure should be provided to ethics committee. Next, investigational product. It is the responsibility of the investigator to keep accountability of the investigation product at the trial site. A pharmacist can be assigned for the accountability of IP. It is the responsibility of the investigator to maintain the records of the product delivery at trial site or inventory site used by the subject, return to sponsor or alternative disposition of unused product. The investigator should maintain the records documenting drug administration to the subject and storage conditions. Communication with sponsor. It is the responsibility of the investigator to immediately report all the serious adverse events to the sponsor. He should comply with the protocol and the applicable regulatory requirements. It is the responsibility of an investigator to ensure accuracy, completeness, legibility, timeliness and consistency with source document of the data reported to the sponsor in the case report forms. It is the responsibility of the investigator to document errors, violation and non-compliance during the trial and avoid them in future. The investigator should maintain the essential document until at least 2 years after the last approval of a marketing application in an ICH region. The financial aspects should also be documented. Next, safety reporting. All serious adverse events should be reported immediately to the sponsor, regulatory authority and ethics committee. Next, site closure. It is the responsibility of an investigator to format the final report and submit the same to the ethics committee. He should provide all the data or documents required at site closure to the sponsor. The investigator has the responsibility in returning an equipment or investigational product or any grant reconciliation. In case of adverse event, the investigator holds the responsibility to premature terminate the trial or suspend the trial. Now I will start with the objectives of trial monitoring and responsibilities of monitor. The objectives of trial monitoring are to verify that the rights and well-being of human subjects are protected, the reported trial data are accurate, complete and from the source documents. The conduct of the trial is in compliance with the recently approved protocol or its amended version in accordance with GCP and in accordance with the applicable regulatory requirements. Selection and qualification of monitors. Monitor should be appointed by the sponsor. He should be trained and have scientific or clinical knowledge needed to monitor the trial. The monitor should be thoroughly familiar with the investigational product, protocol, written informed consent, written information provided to the subject, the sponsor's SOP, GCP and applicable regulatory requirements. He should be aware of the nature of monitoring. So, it is the duty of sponsor that he should prepare a monitoring plan specific to the study. The nature of monitoring should be based on the considerations that are specific to the study, and these are as follows: objective, purpose, design, complexity, blinding size and endpoints of the trial, source data verification, protocol specific instruction, conduct of the trial as per ICH, GCP or regulatory requirements. The essential elements of clinical trial monitoring are to assess the investigator's team qualification and training, verification of the source data, accountability of investigational product, informed consent document review, protocol compliance, serious adverse event review, regulatory compliance, review of facility and resources, deviations and record retention and archival. Now coming to the duties of monitor. First being source data verification. The monitor should verify that the source documents are accurate, complete and maintained as per the protocol. Any dose or therapy modification or intercurrent illnesses are recorded. Any adverse event, concomitant medication are also recorded appropriately. The missed record is also recorded appropriately. The correction, additions or deletions which are being made are being initialed by the investigator or the member of investigator's team. Investigator's team qualification and training. It is the duty of the monitor to assess the qualification of the investigator's team and whether they are trained as per the protocol or as per the applicable regulatory requirement. The personnel should be aware of their responsibilities as per the protocol. Accountability of investigational product. It is the duty of the monitor to verify the storage conditions of the investigational product and to assess that the investigational products are supplied only to the subjects who are eligible to receive it. The subjects are provided necessary instructions for proper handling, storing and return of the product. It is the duty of the monitor to check the disposition of the unused investigational product, which should comply the applicable regulatory requirement. The full accountability of the investigational product should be available at the clinical site. Informed consent document. The monitor should verify that the written informed consent is obtained prior to subject's participation in the trial. He should also verify that the informed consent document is translated in the vernacular language and it is being presented to the subject or subject's legally acceptable representative in a proper manner. He should also check that a copy of signed informed consent is provided to each subject along with the emergency contact details. Serious adverse event. The monitor should assess that the serious adverse events are recorded as per the guidelines of the regulatory authority and the investigator should have personally signed all the serious adverse event forms. Protocol compliance. It is a duty of the monitor to see that the investigator and other personnel of investigator's team are personally informed about the protocol. Investigator is enrolling only the eligible subjects as per the protocol. The drug and the therapy provided to the subject is as per the protocol. Regulatory compliance. Ethics committee at the trial site operated as per the GCP, SOP and regulatory requirements. It is the duty of monitor to check that the essential documents are approved by the respective ethics committee. Any other amendment and serious adverse events are being reported to the ethics committee. The monitor should check that the suspension or cancellation of the trial site is also reported to the ethics committee as well as to the regulatory authority. Accuracy and completeness of case report forms. The monitor should check that the data required by the protocol is reported accurately. Any adverse event or the concomitant medication or the intermittent illness is reported in accordance with the protocol. The monitor should check that the visits that subject failed to make and the tests that are not conducted and examinations that are not performed are reported as such. All appropriate correction, addition or deletion reported during the trial should be initialed by the investigator and it should be checked by the monitor. The monitor should review the facility and resources. He should check that there is adequate facility in terms of laboratories, equipments, drug storage and staff at the trial site. Any deviation, if present, then they should be documented appropriately, which should be checked by the monitor. The actionable taken to rectify the deviation are in order to avoid the recurrence. Record retention and archival. The monitor should check that all trial records are maintained up to date and they are readily retrievable when required. The records are archived as per the GCP and the regulatory requirements. All records are archived under proper environment control. The last and the most important, monitoring report. The monitor should submit a written report to the sponsor after each trial visit or trial related communication. The report should include the date, site, name of monitor and name of investigator or the individual. The report should include summary of what monitor reviewed and monitor's statement concerning significant findings or facts, deviations and deficiencies, conclusions and the actions which are taken in order to rectify the same. Audit and duties of auditor. Audit is a systematic and independent examination of trial related activities and documents to determine whether the evaluated trial related activities were conducted and the data were recorded, analyzed and accurately reported according to the protocol, SOPs, GCP and applicable regulatory requirement. Auditors are the independent individuals appointed by the sponsor or regulatory authorities to conduct a systematic and in-depth examination of trial conduct and compliance with the protocol, SOPs, GCP, GLP and applicable regulatory requirements. The different types of audits performed by the regulatory auditors are first being investigational site audit. These can be routine audits to assess a site's performance, identify deficiency and develop a corrective action plan. These can be conducted for cause. Second, clinical department process audit. The clinical research department of clinical trial sponsoring companies and firm responsible for post-marketing surveillance are being audited. The reasons for their audit are potential for regulatory inspection, desire to improve effectiveness and efficiency, satisfying concerns of upper level management. Third type, data management audit. Sponsor companies and CRO's data management departments are audited with an objective to compare data in data sets against data in CRFs, to review error programs and query system, to review file structure and merger of the data set, to check the security and backup procedure. Fourth, safety department audits. Auditor examines serious adverse events, accuracy of reporting, timelines of regulatory submission, completeness and follow-up, potential hidden serious adverse event within serious adverse event, and appropriate use of technology in processing the event. Fifth, good laboratory practice audit. Regulatory auditors examine data record and record keeping and transmittal process at the analytical laboratories participating in the trial. Sixth, sponsor central file audits. All inspections are conducted without prior notification unless otherwise instructed by the assigning center. The inspections are conducted to determine how sponsor is sure to validity of data submitted to them by clinical investigator and adherence of the sponsor to the applicable regulations. So, we have discussed about the definitions of clinical trial and the important stakeholders in the clinical trials, like the duties of institution, sponsor, investigator, monitor and the regulatory auditor. Thank you.